Welcome to Reddit Aliens. Serious. What was the darkest point in your life, and how did you deal with it? Not safe for work. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. 15 months ago, my wife of 29 years died unexpectedly. My life is shattered. I have not an inkling of what I'm supposed to do or how to find any meaning to my continued existence. I deal with it by continuing to exist, with an implied hope that someday I might find some meaning to my life. I'm not optimistic, but I persevere. Sorry. This was nearly 30 years ago. I was age 21 and had already graduated to college. I married my high school sweetheart in January. It was her senior year in college. For her spring break, her family was on the way back from a trip to visit her grandmother. Their car was hit by a drunk driver. The surgeon told me we couldn't save her. It took several months to just be able to do anything other than eat, sleep, and work. Later, there were some low points when I did things to try and bury the pain. I stopped trying to socialize with others. That lasted a few years. I would leave the house to go be alone in nature. Hiking, sailing a small boat on a lake, swimming, anything to be alone and not have to talk to anyone. Not having to talk to others was probably a big reason I found scuba diving appealing. Eventually, I moved overseas. No one knew me, nothing to explain. I built a new life. And I know we're only on story 2, and it's already pretty bleak, but I can tell you that some of these do have much happier endings, as life does often do. While my dad was dying of ALS, I had my 6th wedding anniversary. I thought my marriage was solid. We had disagreements, but were generally happy. Our child was 5 at the time. One day I sent my husband to work with a kiss. A few hours later, after I sent my kid to school, I sat down at my desk. My husband's tablet was sitting on my desk. It was more of a shared tablet. Our child and my nephews played on it, took pictures and videos. I decided to look at the gallery to see if the kids had recorded anything cute or funny. In the gallery, there was a new file. It was a homemade GIF that lasted about 30 seconds. The video showed my 14-year-old niece, nude. It took me a minute to process what I was seeing. My husband had set up a hidden camera in our bathroom. I hadn't even processed what he had done when I called the police. By the time he got home from work that day, a detective had already contacted me. I immediately got a protective order to keep him away from myself, our kid, and our home. He stayed with his parents while the police investigated. The police served a search warrant at our house and took all the computers, tablets, USB drives, etc. They found more images and full-length videos. He was arrested 4 months after I turned him in. Then, he was released on bail and stayed out for almost a year before trial. My dad died shortly before the trial. I felt like my husband robbed me of time with my dad because I had to be in court. I resented the fact that his choices made it where I had to face these hard times alone. That whole time, his family was harassing me to give my husband a chance to explain and to allow him to access to our child. The court process was grueling. I had weak nights where I didn't think I could stand the heartbreak or the shock anymore. There were days when I fell apart because I had introduced my beautiful, loving, innocent niece to the man who would go to violate and betray her. I had times when I doubted my ability to raise a child in the middle of this shitty time in my life. Eventually, he pled guilty to 8 or 9 counts related to the possession and production of child pornography. Alfred, please, what the F. He was sentenced to 40 years in prison, with 34 suspended. He will have to register as a sex offender for life. I dealt with it a day at a time. My niece lived 1,000 miles away and was able to focus on healing. She's grown into a beautiful young woman. He did not break her, and her shine helped remind me that he couldn't break me either. I'm no longer resentful. I'm thankful that I found out when I did and was able to stop him before he escalated. I'm glad that my child will not have to grow up in constant peril. I'm glad that I'm free from the malignant tumor of a man. I've mourned for my father. I've mourned for the man I thought my husband was. Therapy has and is helped us all. I've even put down my hatred and anger toward my ex, which has freed me in many ways. He's the justice system's problem. Now I just focus on love and watching my children grow. Lost my son. Held his slowly stiffening body in my arms, numb with shock. Pain so vast my mind just wiped like a burnt-out hard drive. You don't ever come fully back from that, but 10 years later I'm doing much better. Fell so deep into anorexia that when I finally got help, I was in end-stage liver failure. The only hospital that would take me was out of state, so my poor mother drove me 4 hours to be admitted, only to be called the next day and told that it was very possible I wouldn't survive. My body was so weak that I couldn't even lift my own neck off the hospital pillow. It was a terrifying wake-up call I needed though. I pulled through, completed an inpatient program, and have avoided major relapses for 3 years now. I'm so grateful to my mother for sticking by me, and everyone who took care of me in the hospital. My life almost ended at 19, and I'm so happy to still be here. Things are hard, but they'll never be that bad again. Good. My father died when I was a child, and then I suffered years of serious abuse and neglect by my mentally ill mother and violent older brother. To make the situation worse, I experienced a lot of bullying at school and was sexually predated on by a close male relative. When the only friend I had backstabbed me for nothing more than her own popularity, she put me down to raise herself up. I couldn't take it anymore and attempted suicide. I'm only alive because someone found me and talked me out of it mid-suicide, which was quite a miracle as I had made efforts to hide myself while I attempted it, and the person who found me normally didn't care less about me. But that day, he said that he had a feeling something was wrong that he couldn't quite put his finger on, so he went looking for me. After being subjected to someone talk me out of killing myself for 45 minutes, I relented. I was then left alone, and in a strange rock-bottom moment, I saw the world and my life with absolute clarity, and long story short, I decided to give life another shot. Rebelled against those who were bad to me, wiped a fresh slate, and really started to fight for myself. I was volatile, but I succeeded in going back to college, dropping out of it, getting a full-time job, and moving out of my home all by age 16. I'd like to say that things were plain sailing from there, but they weren't, as I then battled years of various types of mental health issues and false starts in life. More recently, I've managed to build a better life for myself, and I'm now a student at a top university. I was also diagnosed with CPTSD, but as far as I've come, life is still a serious struggle sometimes, and I've been suffering with this sense of fatigue lately over dealing with my issues. I'm always trying to get better, but no matter how far I come, the past never seems to be far behind me. I'm still hoping, still fighting for a better life. I hope that one day the future I envision, I will get there. Hopefully my aspirations aren't all just fantasy. You'll get there. A few years ago, I had a girlfriend who went from literally waking up some mornings and just sitting in her bed in tears of joy because she couldn't believe she'd found me, writing letters to herself about how she never knew what it meant to have a soulmate. I never even believed in any of that, and then I met you. From meeting my parents and having them think she was lovely, to practically just waking up one day, deciding she feels nothing with no real explanation why or even any desire to explore why. And I got the impression she didn't even understand why herself. Just this incredibly haunting moment of acceptance, like she just knew how she felt and had to go with it. It was almost as if I was looking at a completely different person. After some brief back and forth over the next couple weeks, where she wrote me this whole letter about how she feels like I'm the person she was meant to meet 2 years from now, but she wasn't ready for me yet, which as far as I can tell, she never intended to follow up on. She ends up quite abruptly cutting off all communication shortly after and leaving me in the dark, confused as hell. That really messed me up. It was my shortest relationship, but also the one which ended up affecting me the most. When I feel like a breakup happens for a reason, I can handle it, but this was something else entirely. I also happen to think the fact that the relationship was short actually made it worse in this particular case. At least with longer relationships, you can often look back on the bad times, the arguments, all the things that went wrong to reassure yourself that you gave it a fair try, but it wouldn't have worked out. With a situation like this, not so much. How have I dealt with it? Well, it's hard to say. In some ways I haven't. Time has made it easier to deal with, I suppose, but it still bothers me. It's still the most bizarre situation I've ever experienced in my entire life, and there are some moments from that relationship that I don't think I'll ever be able to unsee. It's looking very unlikely at this point that I'll ever have any sort of closure, and I'm beginning to wonder if I'll ever be able to forget about her. During high school, my mother made me feel worthless in life, wanted to kill myself. Then I realized I can outlive her and be a far better person than her. Now I do good things to spite her and be a better person, along with being more successful than her, with plans to be an artist or open up a fan website for people parts of fandom. Every fandom ever, and no BS, fake fans, censorship, or anything like that. I just need a name and a plan for how to get it in motion. I am at the darkest point right now. I lost the woman who raised me. In 2 days it will mark a year. Then 7 months ago, someone that I called the love of my life left. It was something we both didn't want to do, but love can't be everything in a relationship, and I messed up a shit ton too. I have a shit ton of passion for medicine and school, but I just can't get myself out of bed to even just do basic tasks. I can't sleep, it's all just nightmares, but you gotta move on, move forward, and just keep going. I think it's right now. I've been working since graduating college and feel like I have no life, no friends, no future. And the worst thing is that I know this isn't true. I have a thriving web of friends and family, people who care about me, and the passions I have been pursuing all my life are finally bearing fruit. But it just isn't sticking. The darkness creeps in you and it makes your brain cold, and little by little, the things and the people you love, you're convinced they would be better off without you. I spent a lot of time trying to pair off my friends with people I thought they would get along better with. I called my family less and less. They can focus on and be proud of my brother, so they don't need me. I stopped taking care of myself. I thought I didn't matter. I mapped out how to drive off the road and have it look like an accident. I thought I had everything ready to go. But people are unpredictable and steadfast in their love, and they pulled me out of a dark and put me back here. And I feel like I'm still going to let them down, but worse now. The blackness doesn't go away. It rots and rots like mold in your soul, and I know what to do. I have no time to rest. I'm exhausted. My passions are being steamrolled by the demands of work, the demands of life, the demands of appearing functional and being alive. I don't want to lose what I've achieved. I don't want to lose the people I love, but I keep grasping at rungs of a ladder that just crumble in my hands. I wish I knew what to do. I wish I could believe that I am allowed to exist. You're here now. It's been just over 8 months since when I lost my 15-year-old daughter, so I guess I'm currently living in my darkest time. We always knew her syndrome would take her, but my mind wouldn't allow me to think about it when she was alive. So when I found her, I left my body, actually. It was the most intense and foreign feeling I've ever felt. I hope I never feel something like that again. I'm dealing by doing the things. I live off-grid, away from people. We moved at the beginning of COVID to keep her safe because, well, people cry about wearing masks, so we knew we couldn't rely on the general public to be decent. So I've got a whole lake and beautiful forest to explore. I decided to go back to school for addictions. I can still help people, but it's not so entrenched in the health community, hospital setting, that it would trigger me. I listen to music. I talk to her a lot. I spend time with my boys who are 22 and 19. I'm trying. I have absolutely no words. I mean, spend time with your 2 living children and honor her memory. I'm sorry. This one got to me. In 2012, I was at the peak of my life at the time. I was living with my 2 best friends, and one of them aptly named us the tripod because you couldn't stand without one leg. I had just started seeing a beautiful woman. I had enough money to travel. I was in the best shape of my life. Then, one night I went outside to find my roommate after he got home from work. His car had been in the driveway for 20 minutes, but he hadn't come upstairs yet. I remember pushing on the gate to the driveway and there being a huge weight against it. I pushed as hard as I could and opened it to see his body on the ground. He was wearing his all-white restaurant uniform, which was blood red from the waist up. I grabbed his wrist to check his pulse, and there was nothing. At this point, my friend that came outside with me, he came down to hang out for the night. We were all going to go out, said, "We need to get inside. The person who did this could still be out here." So we went inside. He called 911. I woke up my other roommate. He was napping before our night out, and we went outside. He was dead before I even had found him, murdered. Long story short, he was winning his court case with his ex for custody of his son. He wanted joint custody to split his son's time 50-50. She was completely uncooperative. So he said F it and went for full custody. She had accused him in court of molesting and beating their son, all of which he never did, obviously. She convinced her boyfriend of all of this, so he waited in the dark for my friend to get out of his car and stabbed him to death 31 times. It was the darkest time of my life. What didn't help was that this beautiful woman who I'd started seeing a few months before my best friend's murder started to use his death to manipulate me to stay with her. Looking back on it, I don't know how I didn't see it, but in the moment, I couldn't get away. I never had lower self-worth than I did when I was with her. It was crushing. I felt that I was worthless, that I could never do better than her, or that I deserved anything good in my life. Any decision I made was wrong, and she treated me like garbage as if I ruined her life for small things like going out with friends. Eventually, we broke up. Then around the 1-year anniversary of my best friend's murder, she weaseled her way back into my bed and back into my life under the guise of grief over the loss of our friend. We started sleeping together again. There was a few week-long honeymoon period, and she was back to her old tricks. I finally realized that she was toxic and slowly started to distance myself from her. During this whole ordeal, I was seeing a therapist bi-weekly. She was actually my best friend's therapist, which helped me find some solace in the wake of his murder. Now, after I distanced myself from my ex, and as I was gearing up for the murder trial to defend my best friend's honor and character, this wonderful human waltzed into my life out of nowhere. She just moved back to the US after living abroad for 4 years, and we hit it off immediately. She became my best friend and confidant. Things were just easy. The murder trial came and went. The man was found guilty on all charges, sentenced to life in prison for first-degree murder, and another 18 years for tampering with evidence. He will never see the light of day as a free man again, and I hope he lives a long, healthy life in which he thinks every day about what he did. This ray of sunshine that waltzed into my life at my darkest hour, she's now my wife, my best friend, part of our tripod, is still my best friend. We lean on each other, just like a bipod now. He's great friends with my wife, and we are great friends with his now wife. Him and I take a yearly trip to get out of Dodge of the anniversary of our best friend's death. It'll be 10 years in November. There is not a day that goes by where I don't miss that man. He was the light in a very dark time in my life. He pulled me out of a deep depression and taught me how to be myself and be a better person. I miss him every day. I like to think he would be proud of how far I've come, but it sure would be nice if he was still here. He was the best person I'd ever met. 17 years old was a rough one for me. I started dating my best friend as she was battling depression and anxiety, and I have good reason to believe she tried to kill herself just a few weeks before we started dating. A few months later, she confessed to cheating on me with her ex and then broke up with me for the other guy. 2 months after the breakup, my parents finalized their rather hostile divorce that was 4 years in the making. But the divorce was far from the end of my father's drama, which he insisted on putting me in the middle of. Through all that, an extracurricular I was involved with took an incredible toll on me as well. I won't go too much into detail, but my high school team was competing at the collegiate level in a highly technical field, and our adult mentors pushed us maybe a little too hard to give those colleges a run for their money, killing my passion for the subject in the process. How did I deal with it? Some very supportive friends, and time. I'm sorry you went through all that. And also, parents going through a divorce, using children as pawns is just even worse, and no one deserves that. My mom was driving me to my college dorm after the summer break, and I told her on the long car ride that I was depressed. Bless her heart, the dear didn't really know anything about mental health, so she told me to exercise and eat vegetables. Good advice. I was 20, so I did. I went to the gym 2 hours a day and ate nothing but salads at the dining hall. That made me really sick. The doctor at the University Health Center said it was an eating disorder and gave me pills to help with appetite. I ended up attempting suicide and very nearly died. My brother popped in to check on me and got an ambulance, but I had taken a full bottle of extra-strength Tylenol, and they said 20 more minutes and I would have been too far gone. I was in the hospital for the better part of a week. Here's a happy ending though. I got help. I have bipolar disorder, and I got help. I'm very happy now. My husband is the love of my life and my best friend. I have 2 cats and 2 dogs, and we're obsessed with them. We bought a house out in the forest where I watch birds. I discovered painting. I'm finally using my degree to help people, social services field. My 20-year-old self could never have known how worth living my life was. Last year, I was appointed as a supervisor during the critical operations testing of a nuclear submarine coming out of a very long refit period. We were supposed to be in 12-hour shift work for 3 days, which really isn't all that bad. It went on for 3.5 weeks. The crew had already had a lot of bad times, and I wasn't an exception to that. People were depressed because of the 12-hour days turned into 14, and before you know it, all we were doing was showing up to work and being angry about it. We would go home, sleep for a few hours, and then come right back to work. I watched my senior enlisted supervisor break down because his wife wanted to divorce him because of how much the job ruined him outside of work. I beat myself up over how I couldn't do anything to make things better for the guys. I beat myself up over how effing stressed I was and how much I hated myself for locking myself into that crazy position. It's the military, you can't quit. Eventually, the dark times of crit ops came to an end. It took a while for me to even unpack how much it had messed me up. I ended up getting in private therapy a few months ago, and that helped me sort through the long-standing effects of the stress. Now I run 20-something miles a week and make sure to take care of myself physically, no matter what. It helps. I was 33, and I was gearing up to finish my college degree. Didn't go to college after high school. My then partner of 12 years decided that she's fallen in love with someone else, one of her teenage friends from before we were together. Promptly moves out after we have a few long talks showing that she isn't going to change her mind. Not too long after she moved out, I had to go to my first radiation treatment for cancer. The sudden jarring loneliness and isolation I felt just sitting in the hospital by myself damn near broke me. She was always my biggest supporter, and I could feel her absence. For a while I got angry at the world, at myself, even at her. Managed to muddle through for a while on pure spite. Honestly, the main thing that stopped me from giving up was my dog. I just think, who's going to take care of him if I'm gone? Made a promise of sorts to myself to do better, to be better. It's been rough, but getting a little better each day. TL, DR. SO of 12 years leaves as I'm graduating college and undergoing cancer treatment. Love for my dog keeps me around. Good boy.